Breaking news today, Washington has imposed a hefty 35% tariff on Canadian imports, citing border security and the protection of American jobs as the reasons. But will this drastic measure truly benefit workers, or will it simply make your wallet feel significantly lighter?
Hello, and welcome to That News Show, where we discuss the latest facts, fakes, and hypocrisy as reported by the legacy media. Let's roll the tape.
ISNBC reports that Trump's tariffs on Canada may be alienating a crucial trade partner. Let's consider this. Whenever America prioritizes its workers, why do those who have outsourced American jobs and flooded our markets with inexpensive goods suddenly express concern about damaged alliances? Is their worry truly about economics, or about maintaining a global system that disadvantages the American middle class? While tariffs are not ideal, they could be a necessary response after decades of bipartisan neglect, particularly under the previous Democratic administration. It's time for Washington to remember whom it represents. Why is defending American sovereignty now seen as controversial or merely inconvenient for those profiting from America's challenges? Let's do this.
A shift. It was a bad report, there's no doubt about it, and bad particularly for a president who in political terms owns this job market and this economy, which has been roiled by the chaos of his tariffs and his trade wars. But instead of addressing the numbers and the challenge they present, the president said they were fake, and he fired the head of the department that collects them. Trump baselessly claimed the jobs numbers were rigged. He accused the fired commissioner of inflating numbers for the Biden administration and sabotaging jobs for them under this administration.
Mr. President, why did you fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Because I think our numbers were wrong. I had issues with the numbers for a long time, but we're doing so well. I believe the numbers were phony, just like they were before the election. We need people that we can trust.
The latest jobs report is alarming, with over 250,000 jobs revised away from previous months, and the dismissal of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics only compounds the uncertainty. This erosion of confidence isn't surprising given the politicization of independent government agencies over the years, deepening public distrust in Washington's experts. Economic instability extends beyond the job market. Inflation has surged, with the Consumer Price Index hitting nearly 3% in June, the highest in recent months. American families are feeling the pinch, paying more for everything from cars to household goods, largely due to increased import costs from recent tariffs. While tariffs aim to shield American workers and industries from unfair competition, they often act as a hidden tax on consumers and small businesses, inflating prices and disrupting supply chains. The recent increase in tariffs on Canada, our closest ally and largest trading partner, prompts serious questions about our long-term economic strategy. Although these tariffs might appeal to certain political factions, they threaten vital economic relationships and can encourage our neighbors to bypass the U.S. market. The Northern Corridor Agreement between Canada and Mexico exemplifies this risk, potentially diverting trade, jobs, and revenue from the American heartland. Traditional conservatives champion free markets and minimal government interference. Sweeping tariffs and abrupt regulatory changes inject uncertainty, complicating business planning and investment. A more effective strategy would involve real structural reforms, simplifying regulations, reducing taxes, and ensuring American businesses can compete fairly without government favoritism. The previous administration's excessive spending and regulatory expansions laid the groundwork for these economic issues, adversely affecting our energy sector, border security, and law enforcement. It's crucial to implement policies that rebuild trust in our institutions and strengthen, not weaken, our alliances, prioritizing American workers while minimizing government intervention.
We need people that we can trust. The part he didn't say was like at the FBI or the Justice Department or on the judicial bench. We need people we can trust to do what I want or need them to do or say. Trump says jobs reports were overstated during the previous presidency to prop up Joe Biden and are now being underestimated to hurt Trump. The president has zoned in on the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics being a, quote, Biden appointee, ignoring the fact that she was confirmed by the United States Senate by a vote of 86-8, six senators not voted. Among the 86 who voted in favor, J.D.
The American people rightfully expect integrity and independence from those tasked with protecting our justice system and upholding the rule of law. The past decade has seen a troubling decline in confidence in the impartiality of our federal institutions. The Justice Department, the FBI, and even the judiciary have too often been embroiled in partisan politics, eroding the trust that should underpin our republic. Recent events have intensified these concerns. The investigation into Jack Smith, the former special counsel who led criminal probes against President Trump, highlights the ongoing issue of politicized law enforcement. Smith is now being investigated for possibly violating the Hatch Act, which raises questions about whether prosecutorial powers were used to sway the last election. This incident is symptomatic of a larger issue where federal agencies seem to be used for political purposes, a trend that was particularly noticeable during the previous Democratic administration. Also, the Department of Justice has been criticized for its handling of high-profile cases and its hesitance to pursue significant investigations into matters that concern everyday Americans. The absence of transparency and accountability, especially in cases involving politically connected figures, has only increased public skepticism. There have been calls for a thorough, impartial investigation into financial networks linked to criminal activities, but these have been largely ignored or minimized, leading many to question if the system serves the public or protects the powerful. On the legislative side, the Senate's bipartisan confirmation of the Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner should have demonstrated a commitment to nonpartisan oversight. Yet, the continued politicization of economic data and the readiness of some to question the integrity of these institutions, when the data are inconvenient, only further erodes public trust. This sets a dangerous precedent that threatens the credibility of our entire economic system. The American people deserve a justice system that does not bend to the whims of the prevailing political power. Both parties are responsible for this climate of distrust, but the previous administration's pattern of politicizing the DOJ, the FBI, and the courts is particularly concerning. Restoring faith in these institutions requires a steadfast commitment to transparency, accountability, and the rule of law, principles that must rise above partisan interest to preserve our constitutional order. Looking ahead, the stakes are immense. The politicization of our justice system and the manipulation of economic data have tangible impacts on American families, businesses, and our global standing. It is imperative for Congress and the executive branch to recommit to the principles of limited government, equal justice, and true accountability before the damage is beyond repair.
The day before, Wednesday, Trump also jacked up tariffs on Brazil to 50%. For what he's calling the political persecution of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who's on trial for attempting a coup in 2022.
President Trump's decision to impose sweeping tariffs on Brazilian imports, ostensibly in response to the political persecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro, represents a significant escalation in using trade as a foreign policy tool rather than for sound economic management. While the administration claims these tariffs are necessary to protect American interests and address a national emergency, this approach risks significant economic and diplomatic blowback, particularly as it relates directly to the internal politics of another sovereign nation. PUZN-BC's coverage, though thorough in documenting the economic and diplomatic fallout, often lacks balance and overlooks the broader context of global trade realignment. The network highlights that the new tariffs, averaging around 30%, with some Brazilian products facing rates as high as 50%, will likely disrupt established supply chains and increase costs for American consumers and manufacturers. It tends to emphasize the personal motivations behind the administration's actions without fully considering the legitimate concerns about Brazil's trade practices and the global trend toward protectionism. The fact-checking in this segment is solid regarding the specifics of the tariff rates and their immediate economic impact. There is a noticeable reliance on expert opinions that are uniformly critical of the administration, featuring interviews with former diplomats and economists, many of whom are tied to the previous Democratic administration. This narrative focuses on diplomatic alienation and economic self-harm, with little room for alternative perspectives or acknowledgement of the failures of past globalist trade policies that have impacted American industry. This lack of ideological diversity in sourcing undermines the objectivity of the analysis. Visually, MSNBC excels at illustrating the scale of the trade disruption with graphics that show the affected sectors and the comparative tariff rates faced by Brazil versus other trading partners. Yet the storytelling often veers into dramatization, focusing more on the supposed vindictiveness of the White House rather than the structural issues in the global trading system that have left American workers vulnerable for decades. One area where MSNBC could improve is in its treatment of the Brazilian political context. The network mentions Bolsonaro's ongoing trial for his alleged role in the 2022 coup attempt, but fails to critically examine the legitimacy of the judicial process in Brazil or the broader implications of U.S. sanctions on foreign judges. The submission glosses over significant concerns about judicial overreach and the political weaponization of the courts, issues that resonate with many Americans frustrated by similar trends at home. Furthermore, the coverage does not adequately address the risk that these tariffs could backfire by strengthening anti-American sentiment in Brazil and encouraging the development of alternative trade routes that bypass the United States. The administration's willingness to use tariffs as use in political disputes is a double-edged sword. While it may yield short-term concessions, it also incentivizes our trading partners to seek new alliances, potentially diminishing U.S. influence in the long run. From a traditional conservative and libertarian perspective, The use of tariffs as a blunt instrument to achieve foreign policy goals is deeply troubling. Free market principles and respect for national sovereignty should not be sacrificed for short-term political gain. The administration would be better served by pursuing targeted, reciprocal trade agreements and diplomatic engagement rather than resorting to broad-based economic penalties that ultimately hurt American consumers and risk alienating key partners. In conclusion, while MSNBC's coverage is detailed and visually interesting, it would benefit from a more balanced presentation of expert views, a deeper exploration of the underlying political dynamics in Brazil, and a greater appreciation for the long-term risks of weaponizing trade policy for political ends. The network's tendency to frame every action by the current administration as uniquely reckless overlooks the bipartisan legacy of failed globalist trade policies and misses the opportunity to engage in a more substantive debate about how best to defend American interests in an increasingly fragmented world.
Ambassador Cohen, good to see you. Thank you for being on the show with me.
Ali, it's good to see you, and I'm hoping that my Philadelphia skyline background is making you jealous.
It is, and it looks fantastic, and I will see you there soon.
Ambassador Cohen's view of the Philadelphia skyline may be impressive, but tonight it's the economic horizon facing American families that truly demands our attention. The recent escalation of tariffs on Canadian goods, now at 35%, has immediate repercussions across every sector of our economy. For small manufacturers in the Midwest and Northeast, these tariffs translate into higher costs for steel, lumber, and automotive parts, leading to increased consumer prices at the checkout. Imagine families in Pennsylvania or Ohio budgeting for a new car or home renovation. Suddenly, those projects cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars more due to these protective measures. If we were to visualize the impact, a chart would show a sharp increase in costs for goods dependent on cross-border supply chains. The auto industry, for example, struggles with a patchwork of tariffs, making it nearly impossible for American businesses to plan or invest confidently. This regulatory uncertainty stifles growth rather than fostering it. From a household perspective, these tariffs act as a hidden tax. While the administration claims to support American workers, in reality, families end up paying more for daily necessities, and small businesses, already strained by inflation, face slimmer margins. The promise that tariffs will revive manufacturing has not materialized significantly, and long-term data shows we are merely shifting cost onto our citizens and prompting our allies to seek alternative trading partners. The development of the Canada-Mexico corridor illustrates this point. Rather than enhancing North American cooperation, these policies encourage our neighbors to bypass American ports and infrastructure, risking billions in customs revenue and thousands of logistics and manufacturing jobs. This is not merely a diplomatic error, it's a strategic and economic blunder that could diminish our regional influence permanently. While the administration promotes these tariffs as tools for national security and economic use, such blunt instruments rarely achieve the desired outcomes. They disrupt established supply chains, provoke retaliation, and undermine the trust essential to our most important alliances. The notion of strong-arming our way to prosperity by antagonizing our closest trading partners contradicts decades of conservative economic thought which favors free markets and minimal government interference. The stock market's volatility following these policy announcements signals investors' lack of confidence in this direction. When the Dow Jones drops over 500 points in a single day, it's not just Wall Street that's affected. Retirement accounts, college savings, and small business investments all suffer. Using tariffs as a political weapon sets a dangerous precedent, introducing unpredictability that hampers American businesses' global competitiveness and families' financial planning. Instead of doubling down on protectionism, a wiser approach would involve streamlining regulations, reducing the overall tax burden, and negotiating trade agreements that truly open markets for American goods without alienating our allies or burdening our citizens. We must return to principles that have long benefited this country: respect for free enterprise, skepticism of government overreach, and a commitment to strengthening, not undermining, our economic partnerships. The path forward should empower American workers and businesses, not burden them with higher costs, while our competitors capitalize on the opportunities we forfeit. This leaves us with so many things to consider. This administration was elected to put America first, not to impose blanket tariffs that ultimately burden our own families the most. We are told these measures protect us, yet they act more like a tax on American workers and small businesses, particularly affecting those in border communities who rely on fair trade. Is this truly the best approach to tackle the fentanyl crisis, or is it just another case of Washington politicians pretending to address problems they contributed to? The previous administration, led by Biden and Harris, resulted in chaos and weakness. Now we need strength, not self-inflicted wounds. If we continue to let the so-called experts in D.C. dictate reality, we risk being left with nothing but the ruins of their failures. Be sure to comment below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's all of our jobs to keep them honest. Goodbye.